Hello again, and welcome to LA County Library's virtual program, Faith, Community, and Culture, Faith and Plant-Based Diets. This is the latest installment to our virtual series of interfaith conversations. My name is Katrina Lacerna, and I'm the Asian Pacific Resource Center librarian for LA County Library. I am honored and excited to be your host for tonight. This event is part of our ongoing interfaith conversations celebrating LA County's vibrant tapestry of cultures and religions. If you have any questions for the panelists or myself, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to it at the end of the program. Before we go further, I would like to share a land acknowledgement on behalf of Los Angeles County and LA County Library. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kizh, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrieleno Band of Mission Indians, Kizh Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing you to tonight's panelists. First, we have Jonathan Bernard. After 25 wonderful years serving a vibrant congregation, Rabbi Jonathan Bernard decided to step away from the pulpit to explore new and meaningful ways of contributing to the Jewish community. This journey has led him to become the Director of Clergy Engagement at the Center for Jewish Food Ethics, co-found the Valley Herba, and work towards bringing green burial practices to the Jewish community. And in July 2025, he will become the rabbi at Temple Shalom of the South Bay. He and his wife, Lori, live in the San Fernando Valley and have 3 grown sons, 3 dogs who sleep in their bed, and 4 noisy chickens. Thank you for joining us tonight, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Our second panelist, Kate Carpenter, is a member of the Religious Society of Friends, Quakers, in Pasadena. She has been attending Orange Grove monthly meeting for over 35 years. Her concern for animals and the environment grew from a personal transformative experience and her association with the Friends at Orange Grove meeting. For 30 years, the Animal Kinship Committee of Orange Grove met to support one another and help Quakers and others see the seeds of violence in the food we eat and in the degradation of the environment from animal agribusiness. Kate clerked this committee for over 20 years. Besides tabling and talks at events, an online journal, and many other activities, Kate hosts potluck gatherings at her house, and the food is vegan, sometimes vegetarian. In order to deepen her understanding of the animal concern, she completed a master's in philosophy, writing a thesis entitled Moral Consideration for Domesticated Animals from an Ecofeminist Perspective in 2008. Thank you so much for joining us as well, Kate. Next, we have Richard Foss. Richard has been writing professionally since 1986 and has contributed to over 30 different publications, including the Encyclopedia of World Food Cultures and the Oxford Companion to Sweets. He taught culinary history at Osher Institute, UCLA Extension, and is on the board of the Culinary Historians of Southern California. His book on the history of rum was released by Reaction Books in April of 2012. Food in the Air and Space, The Surprising History of Food and Drink in the Skies, was released in December 2014. He curated a project to document food culture for the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs and curated an exhibition called Cooking Up a New West at the Autry Museum of the American West in 2021. Thank you so much for moderating our talk tonight, Richard. And finally, I would like to introduce Venerable Weijia Shi, a Buddhist monastic from Shilai Temple in Hacienda Heights. He was ordained as a Buddhist monk in 2009 at Wo Gangshan Monastery and had served in its headquarters in Taiwan, as well as Thai Wai Temple in Bangkok, Thailand. He is currently in charge of interfaith as well as outreach programs in the temple. Following the footsteps of his founder, Venerable Master Xingyan, Shilai Temple aims to propagate humanistic Buddhism through interfaith dialogues, promoting tolerance and understanding among different faiths. The Venerable Master teaches, find common ground in differences and not necessarily seek uniformity, but celebrate each other's uniqueness. Thank you so much to our impressive panelists for making time and space for us to have this conversation tonight. We'll go ahead and get started with our discussion by turning things over to Richard, who will be leading tonight's talk. Take it away, Richard.
Thank you very much, Katrina. And I want to say at the very beginning of this, we really thank you for the months of work that I know you put in to getting this program together. It is appreciated by all of us. I do need to correct one thing. My bio still has something that says that the program at the Autry Museum was going to open in 2021. Unfortunately, there were a few other things going on in 2021 that caused the first postponement and eventually effective cancellation of that particular program. They may be doing something similar to it later, but the pandemic made it so that nothing happened at the Autry Museum in 2021, unfortunately. And I'm no longer with that institution. However, moving on to what we're talking about here, just as a little bit of an introduction. The connection between the mind, the body, the spirit, and the diet has been exercising human imagination and philosophical musings since at least the ancient Greeks, the ancient Indians, other people all over the world. They have asked themselves what was the correct diet for ethical reasons, what was the correct diet for reasons having to do with the least impact on the world around them, and what was the diet that would lead to an enhanced sense of spirituality. People around the world have come up with different answers to that, and it's very interesting to have some people who are involved very personally in this. So I'd like to start by asking each of the panelists a question, which is, were you always brought up with a plant-based diet? And was the spirituality of your religion and your personal belief actually the thing that motivated you to change if you were not? Let's start with Rabbi Bernard.
Hi, good evening, and thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be with everybody and to be able to share some reflections and some experiences. For me, I definitely was not brought up in a plant-based home, but I was brought up in a home where different diets were recognized and supported. So my parents were these nice secular New York Jews. We didn't keep kosher. We did some holidays occasionally, most of the time, some of them, but very rarely a whole bunch of them. And so eating was just whatever it is that my mother was preparing at the time. So I ate what my family ate, which was just about everything and anything. And I actually really started down this path having spent one night on a kibbutz in Israel in the chicken coop. And that was my moment. And though I didn't become plant-based at that moment, that was my first experience choosing to go on a vegetarian diet. And it was really less a spiritual thing rather than just an intensely physical experience that really awakened within me an awareness of suffering that I hadn't been aware of.
I have to ask, you spent the night in the chicken coop. Well, were they out of bedrooms, or was there some other?
This was the punishment, if you didn't actually do everything they asked you to do. No. So what happened is, in Israel, because of the weather, especially during the summer, you cannot transport livestock during the day. So you get up very, very, very early, still while it's pitch black. And that is when you place the chickens. I mean, place being a nice word. Put the chickens in the crates, put the crates on the truck, and then the truck leaves. So we spent the night putting the chickens in cages. And that was an experience.
Yes. I think we have enough of an imagination to guess what that was like. Anyway, Kate, would you tell us your personal history with, did you grow up as a vegan or did you convert, and what was your purpose?
No, I didn't have any thought about this. Um, but when my husband died 30 years ago of clogged arteries, and he was like what 52 or 53, and it started me thinking, like, well, why do you die of clogged arteries? And so I started doing some reading and thinking. Well, I should say a year before then he had he was a veteran, so he had a angioplasty, because he had a blockage, and they said change your diet. Well, at that time we didn't know anything about it. We were trying to change it, but we weren't very good at changing it. So what's so common to me now was not at that time. So that I started on my journey then after his death, and had some, and I did research, and I did that master's thesis too in philosophy. So that's how it started. And then I got connected with the friends. So
Mhm. All right, Venerable Huize, how about you?
Thank you for having me. So my process of becoming a vegetarian is, of course, a uh, religious the reason behind it. Um, at first, I was a volunteer at the temple when my younger age. That I stayed. That was when I was still studying in college, but basically staying at the temple for a whole month. That sort of acclimating my whole diet to being vegetarian. And so that actually stayed with me. Like I never went back to eat any meat afterwards. You can say that it's something that's natural. You can say that it's because of the religion that I'm following, but of course, because now that I'm also an ordained monk, that it's also something that's being required for me to follow on a daily basis. So it's not much of like a sudden realization of something, but it's just something that came naturally to me that this is doable. I can do something good just by changing my diet. So that's my process.
Now, I'd also like to ask each of you about veganism as a tradition in your church. Now, obviously, Buddhism does have more of a rigorous set of dietary laws that says that this is a spiritual practice. Is correct?
So technically, not all Buddhist schools will require you to be a vegetarian. And if you do go to India, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia, the monks there themselves, they don't follow a vegetarian diet. So why is that so? It's because since the time of the Buddha, that monks will need to go out to collect alms, not money, but food. They don't they don't go they basically don't work, they don't farm even, because there is also a precept on that. So they will go out with their alms bowls every day in the morning. They'll go in a procession into the towns and villages. So if you do go to places like Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, they'll go in the procession into the towns and villages, and they will collect food from each and every um, how homes over there. So when the lay people are making offering. Basically, you don't get to choose. Like if I'm a vegetarian, so don't give me meat. No, you accept everything that's put inside that bowl. And so that's basically dictates the diet of Southeast Asian monks, the Buddhist monks in those countries. But that actually changed further down the road when Buddhism came into East Asia or first into China. So, do I go on that train or should I stop here?
I do remember that when I was in Thailand and was asking about Buddhist monks eating fish, it was explained to me that to Thai Buddhists, fish are kind of like mobile underwater vegetables. They were like their own category. And I guess people eat what is around their environment.
Well, that's in their own category. Like, from what I heard, like pescatarian, like pesca is it's from
Yeah.
Spanish, pescatarian. So you eat fish and also vegetables. So you're
Yes.
called a pescatarian.
Now, I'd like to ask Kate, is there a large and historic Quaker tradition based on care of animal welfare that motivates people to become vegetarians or vegans?
No. No, but we have we have different testimonies that we try to answer to. There are ways of being in the world. So we have a testimony on peace and equality and simplicity, and so for us, there are a few Quakers across the country that believe in vegan and vegetarianism, and take the testimony of nonviolence and peace, and not just apply it to people, but to animals. But we're struggling with it. I could say it that way.
Would you explain to people who are not that familiar with the Quaker religion about the relative freedom of individual decision rather than, dogma in any way?
Yes, it's oh darn, what's that? Something went off. Quakerism grew in the 1650s or so, out of in England, from and they were Christians, but at this point, um, some Quakers are Christians and some of them aren't. It's like people come to a Quaker meeting and you can develop your own spiritual path. So people come from a Jewish background, a Buddhist background, a non-theist background, and we all sit in silence together and we listen beyond the words. So it's very open. You have to figure out what you believe yourself. You're not told what to believe. So we accept people where they are. We try to love everybody where they are. Am I answering your question? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Just did a beautiful job of answering that question because
Okay.
so the sense of the charismatic leader and Quakerism, or the person laying down the law on Quakerism, just
We don't have any paid clergy. We all minister to each other. I guess we could say it that way. So if we do believe in the inner light or the inner spirit or the universe speaking through us. So I belong to an unprogrammed meeting, meaning we don't have a program, we don't have a minister, though there are different types of Quakers across the world. There's many evangelical Quakers in Africa, which is a different tradition than what we have. But if you're moved to speak, you stand up if you're able, and you give your message, and it's a message for hope for the community. We try to make decisions together as a community, so if I have this leading or this concern about the animals, I need to test it with my community, and that's what we've been doing for the last 30 years.
because you express that your interest in veganism started out on a purely dietary basis and then moved forward, it sounds like, on a spiritual basis.
Yes, it was just the death of my husband started me thinking, and then once I started to realize what happens to the animals, what's happening to the environment, what's happening to the workers in the slaughterhouses, it kind of just totally expanded. And but my son was 11. He's now going to be 41 when his father died, and we were eating just a regular diet and so it was kind of a shock for him that I got so concerned about this. So now that I did the master's in philosophy, I have reasons to give him, reasons rather than just emotion, but he loves me and he gets it, but he's not where I am.
And Rabbi Bernhard, can you talk a little bit about the historical position of meat eating versus vegetarianism and veganism in Judaism? Because famously, Judaism has some very strict, complex, and very easy for even fellow Jews to quarrel over dietary laws. And just curious about your interactions with other Jews and your sense of the spiritual consequences of veganism from a Jewish perspective.
Well, I think, one thing to be really clear about, and similar to what, Kate was saying, is that Judaism is not a vegan tradition. It's not a plant-based tradition. It has indications or inclinations, you might say, because of certain biblical verses. But from very early on, Judaism has allowed for the consumption of animals. So the issue within Jewish tradition is less a matter of, whether the tradition itself is vegan or not. But the issue is, are we actually living up to the standards that our tradition articulates? When it says, we're to be stewards and hold sway and care for all the other creatures on this planet, right? And Judaism from the Torah on acknowledges the sentience of all creatures. So from the Jewish perspective, the question is, are we acting properly in all the things that we do, even when it comes to taking the life of a creature? All right, can that be done in a manner that is as compassionate and as humane as possible? Right, and Jewish tradition says that's our obligation towards these other creatures. So within our tradition, the issue isn't so much, is the tradition plant-based or not? It's not. The issue is, do we live up to our standards or not? And I think a fair, I think there's a fair case to be made that anything that comes from a factory farm can't possibly meet up with our tradition standards of care. So that's where the tension really lies.
Have you, as a rabbi, had conversations with other rabbis about this? And have you either swayed any of them toward your point of view, or have you had pushback?
Well, here I would, when you say have I had conversations with other clergy, I should point out that the organization I work for is Center for Jewish Food Ethics. I am the Director of Clergy Outreach. So the answer to that first one is yeah. They do a whole bunch of that, talking to other clergy. And the other answer is no, have not had success in convincing. But here's the thing. I'm not having these conversations to convince them. All right, that's not, there's different ways of approaching people with, with issues about diet. One way to approach people is to kind of say, hey, listen, you've got to do plant-based or nothing. Like, this is the only way to eat. This is the only way to kind of, quote unquote, from the Jewish perspective, we'll say, keep kosher, right? And there are other people who say, listen, we understand that might be a goal, but we also understand that most people aren't going to make that jump. And we want to bring as much change as possible because of the issues that food touches on, not only in terms of animal welfare, but in terms of health, and certainly right now in terms of sustainability, right? So I'm not looking to convince people that they have to do what I do. I'm looking to raise enough questions so that they reflect upon their actions and begin changing personally. And what my organization does is begin changing their policies, their food policies in their institutions.
I think that that might be phrased as you're not trying to convince them. You're trying to raise questions so that they convince themselves.
Well, I've been told that it's a very Jewish thing to ask questions.
I believe we all probably have heard that.
It is entirely possible.
Um, Now, obviously, there you have something in common with Kate there because you both are people who are asking questions. The Quakers obviously are constantly asking questions of themselves and learning from the other clergy. Venerable Hui, like to ask you, in your interactions with both Buddhists and non-Buddhists, do you find yourself being sort of a representative of vegetarian as someone who is trying to bring that particular aspect forward? And does it have in your experience, does it have a sense of changing their faith or changing their sense of self when they do that?
I think I would like to think that I'm a promoter of like vegetarian lifestyle. As in, we of course our temple, all the food in our temple is always vegetarian, and so every time I bring our friends from our interfaith community, we'll definitely treat them with a vegetarian meal. And so a lot of them, a lot of them start to think, hey, it's actually possible for them to, I actually invited some Hispanic clergy over, and they say, hey, I can actually do, what the certain food using this tofu or that. And so that definitely started them thinking about the possibility of doing it in their culture and in their faith as well. So definitely not about changing their faith. It's because vegetarianism, it's about choice in our food and doesn't necessarily have to do anything to do with faith. But I think the Buddhist approach towards like trying to convince others to become vegetarian is we are trying to get as many people as possible to be receptive of it at first. So our approach is more flexible, as in I've mentioned it that there's pescatarian and there's also flexitarian. As in there is a program that we're running in our temple. We call it Veggie Plan A. So vegetarianism is not a Plan B; it's a Plan A. And we will have all the people, even visitors that are coming to the temple, to pledge for themselves, like, okay, I'm going to eat how many days in this year, or how many meals in vegetarian food. And they'll just write it down, and they'll pledge for themselves that I will eat vegetarian food for 3 days per week. So there'll be 3 days of just vegetarian food. All the other 4 days, you're free to eat whatever. But that actually start a process of them thinking about maybe they can do more than 3 days. Maybe they can even, to a certain point, that they feel that they're comfortable enough to be, full vegetarian. So I think because in the tradition of Buddhism, it's not it's not actually like set in stone that you need to be a vegetarian. It's more like it's a practice of compassion towards all living beings, not just human beings, but also the animals that are living together with us in this environment. To be compassionate to them as well, and I believe this practice of compassion is also very crucial in our own spiritual cultivation as well. So I think this is the whole rationale behind why we are promoting vegetarianism to within our own community, as well as anyone that would come to us, and we will also try to bring some of this idea to them. I mean, for a lot of people that are coming into our dining hall, when they, when they taste the food and they thought to themselves, "Hey, I never thought that vegetarian food can be so good." And so that will definitely start a process, like of maybe they can go like full vegetarian someday. So I would like to think of ourselves as a promoter of vegetarianism to more people. They might not be, be converted to Buddhist. At least we make them to start to think or be more receptive about the idea of vegetarianism.
One curious thing about Buddhism, I stayed a night in a monastery in Korea, and
Mhm.
one of the things that I was told was that the Buddhist monks there were, what they missed most was onions and garlic, because of the fact that it was felt
Oh,
that onions and garlic stir the human passions, and monks
yes,
should eat onions
that's
and garlic.
that's that's
And
what
for Koreans,
written in the scripture.
don't eat onions and garlic is like saying don't breathe at a certain level.
Yeah, it's like, in the scripture, it's almost like they say onion and garlic is like an aphrodisiac or something. Like it's, it's to that extent. So that's why monks and nuns stay away from it. But I think it's still, well, there's a lot of other alternatives that we can add, other spices and etc. So we're still living relatively healthy, and everyone's happy. So I think I don't actually miss it that much, because like every once in a while, if we go and dine out, even like in vegan restaurants, we will get those, and it's almost like you immediately get that, very pungent smell, and you're like, okay, I know what's inside, so maybe I'm just going to skip that one. I think
This
it's about just it's your body is used to it, and so you're basically used to that kind of diet, of that lifestyle, and it's just something natural for us.
that was causing me to think, Rabbi Jonathan. In I remember it said in Jewish culture that the first thing you do when you're starting to cook dinner is throw some onions and garlic in the pan and then decide what you're going to cook, because they're going to be there. Uh, I'm curious if there are any thoughts about the physical characteristics, other than, the notoriously, when you eat a lot of meat, you tend to feel a little bit heavy and kind of a slow moving after doing so. Do you discern, either on a personal basis or any different sense of spirit, any different sense of you're more ready to focus on things of the spirit after, after making that change?
You know, my wife and I both made the a leap to change our diets about 6 years ago, and one of the questions that we got asked as we went through this process is, when, especially for us, it was eliminating eggs and dairy. It's like, do you notice anything different? Right? Is it, do you feel healthier? Do you have a lot more energy or stuff like that? And I'll be honest with you, the answer was no. And part of the reason is that, one of the things I've learned over the past couple of years is diet is it's not only an intimate conversation in terms of it touches on our identity and our community and our history and our memories, but it's also intimate in terms of just how our bodies physically react to certain foods. And you and I can eat the same thing, but our bodies are going to have a very different reaction. Right. So it was interesting to us that, some people we know who've gone on a vegan diet have been like, wow, it made such a huge difference. For us, we didn't really notice it so much, except when occasionally we would have dairy. And that's when we noticed. And that's when we noticed, like, okay, yeah, certain foods, like, really actually, like, we felt kind of like different afterwards, not so good. It really affected us. And it was really with dairy, and what we learned later on is, dairy is it can be inflammatory
Yes.
and causes inflammations and so forth. We're like, oh, so that's kind of what we were experiencing. But beyond that, no. And Jewish tradition has all sorts of different associations with different foods throughout history. And the truth is, garlic and onion speaks to a certain point in time in our history. But, the problem, or not the problem, but the beauty among many things of Jewish tradition is that, we've been around for 4,000 years. So we've sort of been on every continent and engaged with, at some point in time, every major religious tradition. So it's like we've used every starter. If it's garlic and onions, if it's leeks and potatoes, if it's different kinds of, at some point in time, there's some Jewish community, which is, that's the way we began our meal.
Yes, there's a Jewish community in Alaska referred to as the Frozen Chosen, who can probably tell you more about what can be done with the things that grow naturally in Alaska than any other Jews in the world. So you use what's in your environment. Now, may I ask, what particular is it from the Eastern European traditions, your own family, and are there items that you've been able to make where you finally perfected it to where it's like, this is something that's usually made using meat, I've been missing it, and I figured out how to make it?
Well, in terms of, Ashkenazic Jewish cooking. So yeah, so my family does come from, is Ashkenazic, except my mother traces her lineage through Sephardic Judaism. And this might not mean a lot to most of your folks out there, but let me just tell you, when it comes to Passover, that is so helpful. Just saying. Sephardic Jews have different customs than Ashkenazic Jews. Sephardic Jews are a little bit more permissive when it comes to Passover about certain things you can eat. It makes a big difference when you're on a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
Ashkenazic Jews, miserable diet during Passover, as far as I'm concerned. For what it's worth. No offense intended. I grew up on it. So Jewish tradition does have all sorts of different kinds of associations with different kinds of foods, but that's sort of just, culturally, it's sort of wherever we land. So right now, it's as we were chatting about before, bagels, lox, and cream cheese, man.
And Kate, I'm going to ask you, I know that I presume there isn't a particular Quaker dietary tradition any more than there is any other Quaker dogma. But may I ask, from your personal point of view, did you grow up in an American household with a mainly American diet, or was there some other thing that was sort of outside the mainstream that was from the old country or from anywhere else that was part of your diet that you worked to make suit you now?
Well, I grew up in Canada, so my parents weren't particularly religious, but I liked, so it was just just a typical diet, meat and potatoes. So I liked helping my mom cook and all that stuff. I never really thought about it, you see, for all those years until I was in my 40s, until my husband died. So
Well, I was thinking in Canada, I mean, what part of Canada, may I ask, east or west?
I was born in Ottawa and lived in parts of Ontario and Quebec, so mostly Ontario. Um, so just just the regular, maybe it was like an American diet. It was.
Okay, I was just wondering because of the fact that there are parts of Canada that have large Eastern European populations themselves, or the French population in Quebec, and just wondered if there were any particular things that were the taste of home for you that you started making very differently, and maybe are very proud of crafting something that really tastes like mom made it, except no meat. So.
Well, I make a good shepherd's pie, but not with meat. Things like that. But yeah, my parents were not religious. I mean, they sent me to a boarding school in Quebec, and I was confirmed in the Anglican Church, but they didn't have anything to do with it, and that kind of fell away pretty soon. So, we didn't have a tradition. It's interesting to hear Jonathan talk about his Jewish traditions and all that. I didn't grow up with that. So,
Jonathan, didn't you also talk about vegetarian sushi, which I believe is another ancient Jewish tradition?
Well, just that, you ask about how certain foods are being adapted from the tradition they come from in order to become plant-based. Now, when it comes to cooking, I'm not really much of a cook, so my big adaptation is Impossible Burgers. So I can make Impossible cheeseburgers, but there are really amazing and creative people out there, and organizations offering really fun and different kinds of programs. And there's one person I was reading about recently, Jewish, plant-based, and has created a website devoted to plant-based sushi. And just the most amazing kinds of creations around it. And you really see just an amazing both passion and commitment and creativity around ways of taking foods and adapting them.
As I remember in Ashkenazic tradition, especially during Passover, you not only can't eat something that isn't kosher for Passover, you can't eat something that can be mistaken for something kosher for Passover, at least in the most strict of the old Polish traditions. And I was wondering if that Impossible Burger might lead someone at some point to come around the corner and go, aha, caught you.
Yes, so there's a whole category of Jewish thought devoted to sort of something in terms of appearance and giving off the wrong appearance for something. So there is that concern of, oh, if you're eating a cheeseburger and someone thinks, oh, there's Rabbi Jonathan Bernard eating a cheeseburger, I guess that's now okay to do. Right, there was that concern. To which, of course, my response is, well, listen, I do understand that, but if you think eating a cheeseburger is okay, then whether I'm doing it or not, you've got really bigger problems to deal with personally. So from our point of view, you're careful about these things. You don't want to give off the wrong impression, but you got to let people make their own decisions. So is there a risk sometimes? Yeah, but not too much.
Venerable Huige, I have actually been to a Buddhist vegetarian restaurant where I would have sworn there was meat on the menu because they rather the opposite of Jonathan's tradition, where in the one tradition you can't eat something that looks like it's forbidden, but in the Buddhist tradition, they find ways to craft something so that it has an astonishingly similar texture to all the forbidden things. Can you address that a little bit? Because I remember really thinking, this can't be done. This has to be.
Oh, it's yeah, well, don't underestimate like the creativity of human imagination. So first and foremost, it's not like forbidden because it's not in the scripture. It's just a practice of compassion that we consume non-animal products. But since my temple, my Buddhist order is from Taiwan. I mean, if you go to Taiwan, there are lots of vegetarian restaurants, mainly because there's a lot of Buddhists. Hence, they're also vegetarian, and there are huge numbers of stuff that looks like probably like a chicken or a turkey. It's just it looks like that, and sometimes it also tastes like it as well. And people will go into great lengths into making things look alike. Like for example, there's a dish in Taiwan that's called the cha shao, or the like the sanchen roll, which is basically like 3 layers of the pork. And you can actually see in those vegetarian substitute that there is the 3 layers, and it looks exactly like the real thing. And to a lot of people, it also tastes just like a real thing. I mean, if you think like Impossible Burger is just like the uh, the the invention of the century, well, the Taiwanese, beat us to it. So they basically come up with all these vegetarian substitute that looks and almost tastes like the real thing. So, but religiously, it's not a taboo because it's actually okay. Just they're just frowned upon if like you're a Buddhist and why are you eating meat? But that you're not actually violating any precept unless you kill that animal yourself or you ordered that animal to be killed. So that's basically that. But if you have any chance to go to Asia, travel to Taiwan, you need to experience, the vegan food there, the vegetarian scene over there. It's it'll be eye-opening.
Now, you mentioned the food hall at your monastery where you bring outsiders to experience that life and that cooking. Is the cooking there in the Taiwanese style? Is it Pan-Asian or is it world cooking?
So it's a mix. It all depends on like what are the ingredients we have in hand. So mostly Asian and and also mostly Taiwanese, but sometimes you also have some Vietnamese food. We also have quite a number of Vietnamese members over at our temple, and it's open to the public. Basically, it's a lunch buffet, so you can just pay $10, which is $10 for a lunch. You won't be you don't hear that a lot nowadays, and you get to it's basically all you can eat, vegetarian buffet, and so that's the reason why we get such huge number of people coming in just for lunch. Just if you want to visit our temple, so this background here is our beautiful temple in Hacienda Heights, Shila Temple. If you want to visit us, unless you're here for the vegetarian meal, the vegetarian food. If not, please don't come during lunchtime. It'll be hard for you to find a parking space. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like Kate and Jonathan and I are going to have to visit at some time, and we'll look you up.
Mm.
Now, in your community, obviously, it's going to be easy for you to find places to dine out. For Kate and Jonathan, I mean, I presume it's not difficult to find restaurants nowadays that are serving vegetarian or vegan food. But are there particular things that you love and want to see mainstream that you say, this is so great, we need to get this out there? Here's just tell us some of your personal favorites from your personal side of things. Here's the thing that I make that everybody asks for the recipe. And I know, Jonathan, what does your wife make, or what does they ask for the recipe? You mentioned beforehand that your great skill is loading the dishwasher. So
okay, so
not you.
so that is, but I do want to just acknowledge that I'm not completely incompetent. I make a wicked chocolate chip banana bread, but that's only because it's one bowl. Anything you can mix in one bowl, I can handle. That's about my level. But my wife makes killer scones.
And Kate, you mentioned that you host a variety of potlucks. Is there a particular thing that you always bring out to just knock them over?
Well, I usually make a main dish, so a big soup or a curry or something like that. I mean, what am I going to make for Saturday? Sorry, because I have a little cough, so I have a cough drop. I was thinking of making cashew chili, or I can make something else like a lentil curry or something. I don't know, but people bring things, which is really great, and people are experimenting, and I'm encouraging more vegan than vegetarian.
Yeah.
So they're getting they are beginning to feel good that they can make something, that kind of thing.
We didn't know about the cough drop. We just thought you got so hungry from the conversation that you started eating early.
But I will say that I haven't had meat in such a long time that Impossible Burger, I don't like it. It tastes too much like meat, so that's my problem, but maybe it works for other people. And I also don't like the meat substitutes particularly. I'd rather have like lentils or beans or something like that. That's maybe just me. I don't know.
I'm a great fan of those in chili, particularly because that's a family tradition. We've been making chili in my family since I was a kid, and somehow it needs the mushrooms and stuff. There needs to be something. So I'm happy for the existence of Impossible Burger, especially when my vegan uh, niece drops by, so I can make something that she'll really enjoy. Venerable Huija, are you also a cook even on an amateur basis, or?
I wouldn't say that. Like not even amateur. It's quite some time that I went into, actually cooking in the kitchen. So yeah, they'll count on it.
I'm curious about whether you have any questions that you would like to ask each other, because I've been asking you a lot of questions. I just wonder if you're either any of you are curious about each other's food traditions. You don't have to be, so that's all right too. Um, let's go to a couple of things that I have seen a couple of things here where someone mentioned, of course, that Seventh-day Adventists have a tradition of making a wide variety of different foods that resemble the foods of their community. They resemble the traditional meat dishes. Um, then boy, that and here's a lot of people. I personally will vouch for the Highlight Temple's buffet, says someone in the group here. Um, at $10 a head, I guess, with the relatively inexpensive nature of vegetarian food, it's probably still a profit source for the place.
Yeah, it's because most of the food, like ingredients, over at the temple, it's being donated
Mhm.
by our community, mainly as an offering to the monastic community and living in the temple. But we always have access, and I think it's good to share it with other people, and also to promote the idea that they can also, sort of prepare those food at their home as well, and to be able to eat a vegetarian diet.
Do the cooks at your temple give lessons to people so if they have things that they like, they
We
can make them at
do
home?
have cooking lessons, and we have our own venerables, like monastic members, to teach that as well. And we are even like trying to start cooking lessons in basically we have a pizza, vegetarian pizza preparation, how to cook a pizza with the oven, and also we are also trying to start a cooking class for for Hispanic food, vegetarian Hispanic food. So we're always trying to think creatively and also expand our the things that are interested by our audience.
When I was in Korea, I was told that the first person to have a cooking show in Korea was a female Buddhist monk.
Oh.
And that because cooks were historically relatively low status in Korea, a lot of people would not want to be seen necessarily watching a cooking show. But because it was a monk and everybody respected the monks, it was a kind of yeah, it's okay for me to watch this cooking show. It's a monk who's teaching me things. So I was wondering if is there a perceived change in status or the status of people who cook and work with food? Is that is the society you came from Taiwanese society hierarchical that way?
I don't. I don't believe so. I mean, cooks. Yeah, they're especially vegetarian or vegan cooks. They're hard to get. I mean, if you're able to get one, yeah, it's they'll probably have a higher. I don't know how it's like how's the market out there, but I think they'll be paid better just because they know how to cook vegan or vegetarian food. Basically what we do is that if we are hiring a cook, most of the time they'll start off as, a regular restaurant, but when they're here, we just sort of teach them, train them in work. And so basically, I think as especially in Buddhist community or in Asian in Buddhist, yeah, in Asian culture, I think for a vegetarian cook is more highly regarded than someone who just cook regular food. There are a lot of yeah, in Taiwan, like even like vegetarian food, people would eat like consume vegetarian food as like I think a symbol of status, or basically just when you're able to treat your friends like just vegan or vegetarian, it's almost like you are more more learned than other people. So, but that is some kind. It's also, I think it's cultural in a way, and also for Buddhists, even for like you're inviting friends to come over for a wedding or some special occasion, they will still respect you. Basically, they have no choice. But I think when they come and they see vegetarian food, they know that okay, this is a chance for me to sort of purify myself, and also in the sense in an Asian cultural sense, to gain some merits in the process
Yeah.
as well. And so actually after like funeral services, we would encourage like all of the family members for at least for 7 weeks, like 49 for 49 days to observe a vegetarian meal and to be able to dedicate those merits to the deceased. It's because simply by not killing, you're also allowing good merits of, for example, longevity for the other person in their next life.
Yes. And does your community drink wine or other alcoholic beverages?
No, that's part of the precept. So anything that is written down in the precept. So uh, for a layperson, like they have a basic precept of five for a layperson to observe. So that's refraining from killing. So that is a big part of vegetarianism. No killing, no stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and also no taking of alcohol as well as any kind of intoxicant. So definitely out of the picture because alcohol is part of the precept consumption of it.
Now, Rabbi, I'm fairly sure that as wine is a sacrament in the Jewish culture, your attitude would be somewhat different.
In terms of,
Drinking wine or
oh yeah, we like that. So Jewish tradition seeks, and I don't think it's unique in this sense, but seeks what it perceives as being a balance. Right? We don't embrace asceticism, but we're not hedonists either. So wine, sure, in moderation. You can kind of say that in terms of with Judaism, yeah, everything's okay in moderation. So it is considered a mitzvah. It's considered a sacred opportunity and obligation to enjoy things, and to enjoy life and to embrace it. And wine is seen as one of those things that brings joy.
Please tell us about both wine and also just, is there a Quaker obligation to seek joy, or is that a personal?
Of course. Of course. Yeah. As far as wine, we don't have wine at the meeting house, but since I have parties at my house, people can have wine in moderation here, but it's the whole thing, like I like what Jonathan said, moderation.
So, and is there basically sort of that is a Quaker, I would say, precept, just something that is sort of baked into the religion, that idea of moderation.
Yes, yes. Like we every month we ask ourselves queries and we reflect on them for the month. So queries about, do we refrain uh, being addicted to certain substances or things like that. So
That sounds like a marvelous thing for anybody to do, is to just have that self-reflection, that meditation, and to ask yourself those questions. And I think a lot of people don't know about Quaker communities. If someone is interested in finding one near them, because I know we're coming toward the end of this program, where would you recommend that people find out about them?
they should come to my meeting. We have one of the largest Quaker communities in Southern California, Orange Grove Friends Meeting in Pasadena, and I will welcome you. We're very welcoming, fun-loving community, as well as being spiritually based. So, I mean, I was reading some of the chat, and I would love to get to know some of these people that are, if somebody says, but I'm not religious. Well, what do you mean by, what does religion mean? You're spiritual. Everybody's spiritual, even if they don't think they are, I think.
If we start a conversation about what religion means, this could go on until way after midnight and we have all lost our voice. Uh, Jonathan, I understand you're moving to Temple Menorah. Is that in Manhattan Beach?
No, Temple Shalom in Hermosa Beach.
How about Shalom in Hermosa Beach? Ah, okay. The one in Manhattan Beach is blocks away from my house, so I was going to stop in. But
Well, I just want to say Hermosa Beach isn't that far away. You can still stop it. Always welcome.
you underestimate my laziness. I I have the electric bicycle now, so I can get there actually. So are you going to be in your new place in Hermosa Beach, spreading the word or having any meetings or doing other things in order to sort of help make Hermosa Beach a hotbed of Jewish vegetarianism?
You don't have to really see. It's a new congregation, and we have to get to know one another first before really kind of laying out what would be the best way to carry it forward. But I've already learned and seen that the congregation has a really nice ethic around food. So I'm hopeful that as we get to know one another over the months and years together, that we'll be able to develop something.
Hmm. And Katrina, are we supposed to end at 7 or
Oh,
just checking?
we have you have a few more moments if you'd like to continue your discussion. We can start our Q&A in about 10 minutes. This is
Oh,
such a
okay.
fascinating conversation. I can listen to you guys talk all night. So, but we do have 10 more minutes. So if you'd like to fill up the conversation, please feel free, or we can start the Q&A. It's really up to you guys.
Well, I was going to ask, I'm sorry, I actually thought we were supposed to end at 7 and was watching it hit 7:04 and was thinking that like the hook is going to come around to drag us all off here.
We're
But
not at Apollo. You're good.
right. Well, let's start that. But first, if each of the panelists has anything that they would like to have as a closing message, or just a moment or two of, gosh, you didn't ask this question, but here's something I really want to say. Would you care to start, Kate?
Well, I think the animal concern, and along with climate change and everything, I think we really have to think about this really seriously. I mean, it's pressing on my heart and soul that I need to do more, and it's scary because you talk to people that you love, and they don't want to talk about what they're eating. So, but I feel like I've gotten into we've done all this work with this animal kinship committee, but like, what is it? When I'm feeling not sure about what we have produced. So, I'm feeling, Quakers have what we call leadings or concerns. So I have a leading to maybe go forward with some of the young people that are coming to the meeting. Our meeting is getting a lot of Quaker meetings are dying, and they have old people, you know, like my age. But our meeting seems to be growing the last couple of years. We have so many young people, like in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So we don't know what the phenomenon is, but it's absolutely beautiful. So
I
that's
can
it.
understand the phenomenon because this is something that sounds quite appropriate to a modern world in which people are taught to question and more likely to change their faith. So, one in which you are encouraged to question, one in which you are encouraged to seek a truth that is uniquely yours. I understand that. I mean, yeah, that I understand why young people would be very attracted to that. Uh, Venerable Huija, are there any thoughts that you have that you would like to share with people just as a closing before we get to the questions?
Well, of course, I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone here. If you have friends that have some doubts about whether or not they can eat a vegetarian meal, we have a dining hall here that is serving a vegetarian lunch every day, and it's for $10. So can bring them here. You can treat them, and then just let them to judge for themselves where this is the lifestyle or the diet that they'll like. So yeah, I'd like to extend warm welcome to anyone to our temple. Of course, it's not just a dining hall that serves vegetarian food. We have a lot of other stuff around as well, so you're more than welcome to visit us.
Uh, and for another $10, Rabbi Jonathan Bernard will come out and load your dishwasher for you.
Oh, wow.
I don't just load it. I load it the right way.
Ah,
Like anyone can load a dishwasher. This is not impressive.
yeah, and they say that in any relationship, there's one person who loads the dishwasher like a Swedish architect and the other like a raccoon on meth. Why don't you share any final thoughts and
Well, you mean aside from the fact that my wife might be a raccoon on meth? Okay, yeah, sure. Let's go with some other. Final thought. So, a teacher of mine was once asked in class, "How can you tell which religious tradition is a true tradition?" And his answer I thought was wonderful in part because it came so quickly and it was so very just straightforward. He said, "You can tell a true religious tradition by whether or not they teach compassion as their most important value or not." And I always was struck by that teaching and have really, to the extent that I can, really tried to take it to heart as part of my rabbinate and as part of my teaching. And it's really wonderful to sit with other people who live and feel the same way in terms of how important it is to be compassionate, not only to other human beings, but really to all life. And are seeking different ways of trying to bring that to reality. And it's just great to know that there's different places, different people, different religious traditions struggling to kind of figure out how to make this, a more compassionate world, because good Lord knows it could use it.
Oh
you-
man.
indeed, that answer is a beautiful one, and it reminds me of one that I had observed, which is, well, the ancient Greeks were very good with words, and they had a particular word which means to be filled with God. And you know that in Greek, the word God is theou. And to be filled with God in ancient Greek was enthousiasmos, from which we get the word enthusiasm. And that's another aspect of true religion, is that it comes from the heart, it comes from the enthusiasm, not just the following of rules, or even worse, the enforcing of rules on others. But true spirituality has that enthusiasm. And I want to mention that all of you have shown that, and this has just been a beautiful discussion. Um, I would like to encourage people who are interested in this type of discussion and in other ways in which food and anthropology and history and philosophy come together. I'd like to let you know that there is an organization called the Culinary Historians of Southern California that meets on the second Saturday of every month except July and August in downtown Los Angeles, where they explore all different aspects of foodways throughout history, throughout time, and through every culture from the poles to the tropics. And the more you learn about culinary history, the more you learn about culinary anthropology, the more you discover that everything is connected to it. Everything about a successful culture has something that will be related to a stable diet. People will develop their own food ways that reinforce that culture so that, oh, I don't know, suppose you were wandering in the desert for a few thousand years and or scattered around the world for a few thousand years, your food culture is going to help you keep that together. Or if you are someone who is from an island off the coast of China, a little piece of Hacienda Heights that it looks like the island off the coast of China and tastes like it too, is going to reinforce your culture. So I encourage everyone on your own or as part of a group, uh, study spirituality and study culinary history. If you're interested in what I do, I have a website at richardfoss.com that has all sorts of philosophical meanderings, along with a little bit of the science fiction that I've written, along with also some of the several thousand food articles and essays that I've written. So thank you, everyone. And let's invite Katrina back to ask y'all questions.
Thank you so much, Richard. And I'm going to share one more time everyone's links in the chat so you can connect with everyone after our program, just so you can keep tabs with all our wonderful panelists and see what they're up to. But yes, let's go. We got a lot of questions in. So to begin, Martha asks the perennial question when it comes to a plant-based diet. I would like to know if any of the panelists have advice on transitioning from a carnivore to a plant-based way of eating.
Yeah, I'd like to start with that. I think support or like community is definitely very important because from my personal experience, I started to become a vegetarian because, well, I spent a whole summer living in volunteering in the Buddhist temple, and hence, I've all well, the temple cooks the food for me, and I get to be able to acclimatize to that. And also, it's very important when there are people that are able to, cook in the same family, be able to also be supportive of you in that way. I'm very thankful that like during, of course, in my college years, there are friends that are supportive, and also back then I cook my own food, so I get to choose my own basically my own diet. And so I think just the support factor that comes around, and if you have like a religious community, a spiritual community, they're able to support that as well. I think that'll definitely be a plus that you're in that environment. Everyone around you have that kind of diet, speaks the same language, the same idea around veganism or vegetarianism. I think that will really help a lot with the process of transitioning. Of course, for me, I think my body, because of staying a whole month in the Buddhist temple, is just acclimatized really quite easily. So I think well, it will at least take a couple of weeks just eating full vegetarian diet to sort of really be able to transition through.
I would also throw out there because I think community is absolutely essential. But in addition, I think two other things is first, it's not all or nothing, right? Take steps, try different things. Any number of times when I've shared with anybody that I'm plant-based in terms of my eating, the funniest thing is I almost always get told what their favorite food is, right? Because they'll say it, right? I'll say I'm plant-based. They said, "Oh, I'd love to do that, but I just can't give up."
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So, and I get that. I get that. I had that problem. I was vegetarian for many years before I became plant-based in my diet. Like, yeah, totally there. So I think it's real important for people to kind of understand it's not all or nothing, that it's a process. And I think, look for swaps. There's all sorts of different kinds of swaps for different kinds of things that you can, replace eggs by using flaxseed. 1 tablespoon of flaxseed to 3 tablespoons of water kind of creates the binding agent. There's different kinds of things like that and different ways of doing substitutions that I think ease a transition along.
I'd like
So
to mention
that
that
along with community, I think, are really important.
first of all, the quality of vegan foods that are replacing uh, carnivorous foods has gotten startlingly better. The plant-based cheeses used to be just awful. They all tasted like cashew or coconut, and there are really good ones now.
Mhm.
It's less and less of a compromise. And also, just a little bit of historical perspective. I started reviewing restaurants around Greater Los Angeles in 1986, and have been doing so continuously, and I'm still doing it in the South Bay area. And I have watched the quality and variety of vegetarian and vegan food when you're dining out absolutely shoot up. There used to be a lot of restaurants where if you went in there and you said you were a vegan, you either got what's that or go somewhere else. But it's no longer weird. And it used to be okay, we can do a vegetable plate, and you had to take a good look at that vegetable plate to see whether that was cooked in butter, what else is going on here. But there are some startlingly good vegan meals in restaurants nowadays. Another thing is it used to be where people, especially in a business environment, I've talked with people who are in a business environment and they're at a big business lunch, and the server comes around and they're having to ask all of the questions that you ask because it's somebody else has ordered it. And that's just no longer odd anymore. People are willing to be assertive now and say, oh yeah, we're going to this business lunch. Make sure to get a vegetarian one or a vegan one for me. So there's no longer any sense of you're going to set yourself apart as being strange or I don't want to cause any trouble. I don't want to be too demanding. Um, it's just don't be afraid. Go out. There's excellent vegan food in almost all restaurants. Strangely enough, one of the ones I have to give them a shout out. One of the ones that has some great options is Fogo de Chao, the Brazilian restaurant that is mainly known for meat. Their buffet has some wonderful. The roasted eggplant, the roasted marinated eggplant on their buffet is just great. And I go there on a regular basis with my vegan niece, and she loves it. So it's no longer such a big step. Take it if that's where your spirit takes you.
Perfect. All right. And again, we have so many questions, so let's try to chop through them. This one is from Jasmine. Do you have advice for any of us who feel timid about speaking out about animal welfare in our spiritual community?
I'm going to take that. I think we have to just have courage and to feel because we say that we feel compassion and we feel the suffering of the animals and we care about the environment and everything. We just have to take the step from the thought into action. And it does take courage. I think doing it in community with other people helps. Um, that's what I need to, like I was saying, I have to help reinvigorate the Animal Kinship Committee at my meeting after all these years.
I would add, I think it's understandable to feel a little timid about it. Food is really personal.
Yeah.
Bringing it up under almost any circumstance is almost guaranteed to get some kind of reaction. Bringing it up in a religious circumstance where everybody's absolutely certain they're doing the right thing and exactly what God wants is even more challenging. So I think first, I would just want to acknowledge, like, yeah, it's not easy. And I, for my part, at various times, would hesitate, even within my own congregation as to whether or not to push on certain issues at certain times because of what I knew was going to be the pushback that I was going to get, and not being entirely certain that I'm like, okay, I don't know if the pluses and minuses are going to work out here. such as to make it worse. So first, just like, yeah, totally get it. Second thing I would say is it's totally worth it to figure it out, because there's so much that's on the line here. And there's so much that is important in terms of our dietary choices and the impact that our personal dietary choices can make. So I think it's tough, but it's worth it. And one thing to consider is to just start with the clergy and just start one-on-one, or start with a small group of people in the institution who you know, but start small and not kind of bringing it out to a larger group. Might be just an easier way to kind of practice and hearing what some of the concerns and responses are going to be. So for what it's worth, that might be a few steps that would help.
Well, I think for a Buddhist community, it's definitely much easier. First of all, that after a service, we are treating everyone that's come to the service, no matter you're a member or not, to our dining hall, and so you get to experience it yourself. And so we just need to raise the awareness that, hey, do you know that the food that you're eating today is vegetarian, and the reason why Buddhism encouraged vegetarian is this and that, to be able to develop compassion within ourselves towards all living beings, and etc. So it's basically just let them experience it themselves just by dining together with us, and to raise awareness that, hey, it's always possible that you can do this at your home as well. So it's I would say we're more fortunate in that way.
Thank you all. Richard, did you have anything that you wanted? Oh no, do you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation?
Not
No? Okay,
I
excellent.
can't think of anything that they didn't already say.
Already cover. Perfect. Okay, so we can move on to the next question. This is from Patricia. I am interested from all the panelists, this is open to everyone. From your viewpoint, what is the connection between what we eat and spirituality?
Whatever you make it to be, whatever you feel. I mean, that's really the answer, because some people are very aware of what they eat, both in terms of the dietary consequences and in terms of the, do I want to eat that? I know about the conditions in those farms. I know about the conditions, not just about the conditions of the animals, but about the condition of the humans. So if you choose to focus on these things, you may find yourself having a more restricted diet, but presumably having other consolations, other aspects of it that would make it worth it for you. Follow your own heart and spirit, says the only guy who's not involved particularly in a religion, but
That's okay, we want your opinion too. Does anyone want to share their thoughts on the tie between food and spirituality?
That's what we've been talking about. That's what we've been talking about, Katrina,
Okay.
from the
Well,
at the beginning, more at the beginning of this. And I just want to say, Richard, you've done a really good job with this.
yes,
Yeah.
you're a wonderful moderator. Thank you, Richard. And we're getting a lot of very complimentary comments in the chat from all our wonderful audience members. They're very happy with how insightful you've all been and your observations. But yeah, we have so many questions, guys. I'm so sorry. I think we can take one more because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. You've been so generous. So I don't even know how to select. There's so many. Well, this is an interesting question. I don't know. Maybe we go off on a comedic. Very interesting discussion. What about the fact that vegetables are also alive?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. So, from a Buddhist perspective, of course, there's a precept of refrain from killing any living beings. And curious enough that plants are not categorized as living beings in Buddhism, because you cannot be reborn as a plant, first and foremost. No way. And plants don't really suffer as animals how we suffer. They don't have the nervous system to let them feel the sort of like the suffering as in the same level as conscious sentient being does. So that's a whole other discussion. But basically in Buddhism, like from the time of the Buddha, plants are not, you know, they're not sentient, so to speak. They cannot feel pain in the way that a living being would. And there's no way to be reborn as them. They're not counted as living beings, but in terms of Buddhism.
There's a word for people who eat neither animals or plants. It's called dead people. That's what keeps us alive.
Okay. I always find that question, it's kind of a distraction from the real issue. Yeah, yeah. And I agree with what the venerable, wait, I can't remember. The venerable said. Okay.
Yeah, that'll do.
All right. Did you want to add to our this discussion, Jonathan, about our plant sentient being?
No, I appreciate the question. And would just say, from the Jewish perspective, first, life isn't binary. It's not living and dead. It's life exists on a spectrum. We understand that living living in that way or seeing it that way means we're going to give different weight to things. And one of the ways the Jewish tradition draws that distinction is exactly what we were just hearing in terms of Buddhism, which is we draw that distinction in terms of sentience and the ability to suffer to the extent that we understand it.
Thank you all. And I know we have 3 minutes, so this question's popped up, and I think it's something important to ask. It's from Nancy, and she asks, do your organizations practice activism in regard to societal policy?
Yeah, I'll give that a go first. So at least in my case, the answer is in part yes, because I work for an organization that is in fact dedicated towards activism in terms of societal policy. But I would say, and one of the great things in terms of what I see in the Jewish community is there are a number of different groups out there that are all looking to kind of create change because there's a number of different ways that you go about it. No one way works for everybody. So it's nice even though it's not as many groups or as many people in each of the groups as I would like, it's nice that at least there's a number of different groups out there, and there are more and more institutions and like synagogues and schools and so forth that are taking up this issue in terms of what they're looking to offer and how they're looking to provide for their congregants.
I think that any responsible person at this point is at some way practicing activism regarding societal policy, because there are inequities and iniquities that we all see we have to do something about. And what particular method you use, whether by your own consumption or whether by your words to try to sway others, any responsible person, you've got to be doing that. But maybe I'm a product of this era in which people think they can actually make changes.
We have to have a hope. We have to have hope. Yes.
Did
Agreed.
you want to add anything, Venerable Boise?
Um, so to be frank, our temple, in terms of activism, say not much, but I think we're trying to like affect change in other ways, as in a much more practical level, as what I've been sharing, the dining experience, when they're able to come in and to break bread and to share a meal with us. You know, I like to think that that actually sparks some change in their lives, as well as their decision of whether or not that like veganism or vegetarianism is even possible in your life.
Thank you very much, Luigi. That's a wonderful note to end on, because I think it's important to note how being in community is so important. And we've done that tonight. Thank you to our wonderful panelists and also our wonderful audience who was so active in the chats and just had so many questions that we can't get to them tonight. It just means that we need to invite you again for further discussion. I'll go ahead and share one more time all of our panelists' links online so you can connect with them and keep up with, again, their activities and what they're up to. So feel free to join them online. But again, I want to thank everyone who participated tonight. Richard, Kate, Jonathan, Lazy, thank you so much for, again, being so generous with your time and your spirit. This was a wonderful conversation. And yes, have a great evening. Thank you again. And please join us for future library events. We do this all the time. So we have these lovely conversations every so often. Please join us again in the future. And again, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Have a wonderful evening. Take care and be well.